Good morning, everybody, and welcome on behalf of the European Commission and the German presidency of the Council to the 2020 SME Assembly. I'm Shona Murray, and I'll be your guide for the first ever online version of the annual SME Assembly, which we've given the title, Building a Sustainable and Resilient Future Together. Now, over the next day and a half, we'll focus on the policies and actions needed to help our economy recover and to build further resilience and sustainability into the enterprise ecosystem. It'll also be an opportunity for us to celebrate the solidarity between communities, which really is sustaining us, and the ingenuity and generosity of millions of entrepreneurs and small businesses who are leading the fight against the virus and its consequences. Now, I hope you've already had an opportunity to meet each other in our networking rooms. If not, there are plenty more opportunities. Just click on the networking tab on the portal and follow the instructions. Of course, be sure to use our forum facility and social media throughout the conference to share your insights and, of course, your highlights. And a reminder also, please use the hashtags. These are displayed on the screen on the portal. Now, in this opening session, we'll hear from Peter Altmaier, Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy at the Federal Republic of Germany, and Thierry Breton, Member of the European Commission for the Internal Market and SMEs, about their immediate response to the COVID pandemic and the longer-term measures we need to put in place to ensure a sustainable recovery. So it's now my great pleasure to invite Minister Peter Altmaier to make his opening remarks. The floor is yours, Minister.
Yes, thank you so much for this kind introduction, Commissioner. Dear Thierry Breton, good friend, members of Parliament, and of course, entrepreneurs from across the European Union, ladies and gentlemen, good friends. It's with a feeling of frustration and disappointment that I open today's conference. I was looking so much at the beginning of our presidency for welcoming you personally, addressing this meeting personally in a physical presence, because it is from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you and to the many, many million of SMEs across the European Union for everything that you have achieved in the past to the sake of Europe and its member states. The SMEs, and this is a discovery that is not as old as it seems. For many decades in the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, the big companies and the big trusts were dominating our economic activity. And now, for a couple of years, perhaps 2 or 3 decades, we have discovered or rediscovered the importance and the value of a sound and sustainable SME infrastructure. You have created so many jobs. You have organized a stability of our economic and business processes that is unprecedented, and we owe so much to you. And when it comes to COVID-19, it's even more important to say once again, thank you. Thank you for all the efforts to cope with the pandemic. Thank you for all the efforts to help our citizens in Europe coping with the pandemic, and thank you for all your own efforts to survive and to keep our economic infrastructure substantially intact. It is important that we as politicians, as the presidency of the European Union, as the Commission of the European Union, do whatever we can to support your activities. And I would like to extend a very warm thank you also to Thierry Breton. Thierry has tabled a SME strategy together with the industrial strategy of the European Commission. We have welcomed this enormously. We have our own SME strategy in Germany since July last year, since August last year. We have an industrial strategy, and both of them are important to make sure that Europe can compete successfully in a globalizing world that is perhaps more challenging for us than ever before. We are now all waiting for the for hopefully successful rollout of vaccination, and there is a European company, an SME, so to speak, that has played and still plays a leading role in the fight for a vaccine. That would help us enormously. We will see better moments next year in spring and in summer, as we experienced this year. But in the meantime, we have difficult weeks and months ahead of us. And so many member states have established support schemes for their SMEs. It's not just in France, in Austria, and in Germany. It's almost across the European Union. And it is important because we know you are not only a vital part of our economic life, you are part of our local, regional, national, and I say it by purpose, European identity. And this is why we want you to flourish and to survive. I thank the European Commission and especially the state aid services of the European Commission that they have examined and approved so many support schemes over the last couple of months. I know how difficult it was. Our European Union is based on the single market and will be based on the single market for the future. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to make sure that in this critical moment, we can support our SMEs. It's not against the rules of social market economy. No, the rules of social market economy have been suspended by the virus. That is the important point. And if we want all these honest, clever, smart, successful SMEs to survive this pandemic, then we have to offer relief, not for every loss and every problem, but when it comes to the bigger challenges caused by the pandemic. And at the same time, we have continued our efforts as the European Union to help you with the resilience of supply chains. In the first wave of the pandemic, many supply chains broke down, with the consequence that many producers had to stop their activities completely for weeks and months. This is now something we have overcome. The supply chains inside the European Union are intact, and I say so, as far as I can see, will remain intact. And we have a much better situation internationally than we have seen it in spring of this year. The second point is that we will help you to innovate, because the big challenge next to the pandemic still is global innovation. Global innovation in a ever-changing environment. We have seen China and many other Asian countries developing from developing countries to emerging countries in the direction of industrialized countries. And they are investing so much in research and development. They are preparing to increase their share of value production. And therefore, we have to help you in the process of innovation when it comes to digitization. Gaia X is one of the projects when it comes to Industry 4.0, when it comes to artificial intelligence. Yes, and then of course we have to support you in the process of climate protection. The Green Deal is of an utmost importance for all of us because it's about the sake of the planet. But at the same time, we must make sure that this is not done at the expense of the SMEs. And therefore, we are engaged in talks with the Commission, with Franz Timmermans and many other, what we can do to make best possible use of the Green Deal as such and to protect against undesired consequences wherever this is needed. And ladies and gentlemen, finally, we all have witnessed the American presidential elections. I was deeply impressed when I saw, after the president-elect was declared by the media, the enormous relief around the globe in almost all countries, including the United States, in Europe especially. And we all hope that with a new president, we can have a restart of our cooperation and our relationship. I believe it's in the interest of the SMEs that we have open markets, that we have level playing fields, that we have a rule-based multilateral trade. All these issues are taken into consideration by the German presidency. And last but not least, I know you are looking at the burdens of bureaucracy. Apparently, or ever-growing burdens of bureaucracy in your member states, but also on the level of the European Union. We have become much more sensitive to this issue in some of the member states over the last couple of years, also in Germany, and I'm aiming as good as I can, and this is one of the few points where I not always agree with my good friends and colleagues in the Commission. We want to set rules that would allow us to reduce the bureaucratic burden for SMEs, companies, and many others in the European Union. Thank you so much for your attention. I have, during our presidency and before, established a very close working relationship with Thierry Breton. Is somebody who has enormous respect and sympathies for the SMEs. We are united in this, and we are willing to promote your interest, not only during the presidency, but also in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Altmaier, for those motivating words. Can I now invite Commissioner Breton to address the Assembly?
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you, my dear Peter, for your remarks, and ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, I'm extremely happy also myself to be here, because as Peter Altmaier just said, in fact, I will never forget that I started my life as an entrepreneur in an SME. So. That's why it is very close to my heart, and I would like to join also my thanks to all of you for everything you have done. So, of course, this assembly has always been the moment to look back on what has been done in the year gone by, and this year, of course, as Peter mentioned, is extremely different. There is no time to look back, but we must press forward. The COVID-19 crisis is unlike anything else we knew in our recent history. But one thing is probably certain now. It accelerates trends long in motion in technology, in climate change, as Peter mentioned, and also in resilience of our supply chain. And we all know that SMEs are very strong, important, and big element within our supply chains. But this is why we could say that SMEs are at the epicenter of this pandemic while going through this major transition. If everybody could be on mute, it will be perfect. Thank you. SMEs are at the epicenter of this pandemic while going through this major transition. A recent study by SMEs United indicates that more than 90% of SMEs saw their turnover fall, unfortunately. About 2/3 have delayed their investment decisions or cut back investment, which is a big issue for us, and the crisis can leave at a lasting mark, but not if we act together and act swiftly. The 23 million of SMEs of our union do not only represent 99% of all companies, they are also deeply woven into all our industrial ecosystems. They play key roles in every value chain. They bring innovative solutions to intractable problems. They are key to Europe's digital and green transition, and we need them to build a resilient Europe. Earlier this year, in March, as Peter Altmaier reminded us, we adopted the SME Strategy. Since then, much has obviously changed, of course, but the fundamentals remain the same. Our challenge is the twin green and digital transition. So the strategy is more relevant than ever. It remains our compass for SME support in the recovery. Let me give you a couple of examples on how the strategy is going to help. We are supporting a green transition. The Enterprise Europe Network is putting in place sustainability services, aiming not just to help SME transition to sustainable business model, but to ensure that they lead. We are embracing also digital transition, which is extremely important for our competitiveness and our innovation. And the Commission is putting together a digital volunteers program through which digital experts can share their knowledge with SME employees. And of course, we are facilitating access to markets and finance, which is extremely critical for SMEs. But today, I want to focus with you on a specific issue that the crisis has highlighted and, let's say, aggravated, late payments. They account for 1 out of 4 bankruptcies in the EU. Fewer than 40% of SMEs are paid within the agreed payment terms. And of course, this is not acceptable. In France alone, if every single business and public authority paid their suppliers on time, it would generate an additional cash flow of almost 20 billion euros. And this money, which SMEs urgently need, is really so important for them, and especially at this very time. The crisis is only, unfortunately, accelerating bad payment behavior. Companies are accumulating liquidity by lengthening their payments to their suppliers, even through larger companies have much easier access, of course, as we know, to funding than SMEs. So if we do not address this issue, a large number of SMEs will close down. For each invoice that is not paid on time, or sometimes even not paid at all, 4 more invoices will not be paid. This is how late payments spread, like a virus through supply chains, undermining their viability and destroying their resilience. So unlike other viruses, of course, however, we still have, of course, to cope with it. I refer to the rules we have in place, the Late Payment Directive and the laws in the member states to apply this directive. This crisis is definitely, let's say, a wake-up call to apply these rules more rigorously, to build a new culture of prompt payment based on fairness and respect of suppliers. We are shaping together this new culture through the industrial ecosystems. These ecosystems capture all actors, from researchers, manufacturers, SMEs to suppliers and service providers who are increasingly, let's say, interlinked, increasingly dependent. And this is why, again, for us in the Commission, tackle this issue at this industrial ecosystem level is good, because again, we can follow, we can measure, we can anticipate, and we can also see what is happening in every single ecosystem, and then react quickly to help SMEs, which are, of course, in every single ecosystem, the biggest number of companies and players and actors playing a very big role. So In that perspective, by the way, I always remind large companies when I engage with them their responsibilities towards their suppliers, and especially in the crisis. And it is true in automotive, it is true in defense, ecosystems alike. Of course, I don't blame anyone, but I think that in this crisis, solidarity is extremely important. We can and must do more. So in the SME strategy, we have come forward with further actions. First, I am happy to announce the launch of an EU observatory to monitor payment behavior. To address late payments, we need to know why and where they occur, as well as how they affect businesses. And we need also to spread awareness about this. The observatory will first focus on the construction ecosystem before expanding to others. A second tool to fix late payment is alternative dispute resolution tools. Payment make up more than 70% of commercial disputes involving SMEs, yet SMEs do not go to court, of course, as we know, to solve them. So court proceeding cost money and time. Moreover, they leave behind broken commercial relationships. We will bring together major players in the area of alternative dispute resolution and mediation. And with their help, we will design and test pilot alternative dispute resolution schemes to support SMEs. And finally, I will not hesitate to go against those member states whose public authorities delay payments to their suppliers. The public sector has, let's say, special responsibility in building a culture of prompt payment. Let me finish with a few words on our recovery plan, which is important, of course, very important for you, for all SMEs. I welcome, of course, the agreement reached on November 10 between the European Parliament and the Council on Europe's next long-term budget and Next Generation EU, our temporary recovery instrument. These funds are essential for SMEs' recovery, for investment in Europe's future to emerge stronger and more resilient from the current crisis. National recovery and resilience plans offer definitely an unprecedented opportunity to empower SMEs in Europe. Alongside 37% of green transition and at least 20% of the plans have to be earmarked for digital transition, including for SMEs. And I encourage member states to ensure that their national reform plans benefit, of course, SMEs. We will also channel funds to SMEs through our EU programs, such as, of course, InvestEU, the Single Market Program, Horizon Europe, and our brand new Digital Europe program. So as a conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleague, I would like to say that our SMEs enjoy a strong, robust recovery after the 2008 financial crisis. We need to repeat this history here. We have taken our bold policies initiative, and we need to be just as bold as in their implementation. The German presidency, with its very clear vision of the Mittelstand, and thanks to the endless effort of my friend Peter Altmaier, has been a reliable partner in this. And I would like again and again thank you, Peter, for everything you do for this and for the support you bring us, helping this so important landscape of our economy. I am sure that the 2020 SME Assembly will again produce a forward-looking policy initiative, just like indeed in the past. I wish you a good and very profitable conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton, for that very helpful statement to the Assembly. Now, we understand that you both have very hectic schedules for obvious reasons, but I think we have time for at least one question to both of you from a German ex-entrepreneur who, like many SMEs across Europe, are really facing quite an uncertain future. So here's the question. Dear Minister Altmaier, dear Commissioner Breton, as an export-oriented SME, we rely on global leadership to help keep borders open and fair trade agreements to access foreign markets. So what are the Presidency and the European Commission doing to ensure that export markets, supply chains and networks stay open for SMEs, particularly in times of crisis? And I'll ask that question to Minister Altmaier first.
Yes, thank you. This is indeed an important question. First of all, having the privilege of sharing 5 different council formations, I can say that we have tabled that issue in almost every council meeting under German presidency, with the support from the Commission. It entails, in my view, 4 big points. One is, with regard to EU itself, the internal market that we have achieved so successfully over the last 3 decades basically requires also a borderless Europe free of border controls. The 2 of them, the market and the border controls, are legally not interconnected, but we have seen in the first wave of the pandemic that the fact that border controls were introduced between many countries of the European Union has slammed down economic activities of many SMEs, has distorted supply chains within the European Union, and therefore we all agree that this shall not be the case again in the foreseeable future. And I'm very pleased and satisfied that so far, despite the fact that the second wave has been higher than the first wave of the pandemic, our borders are kept open and the internal market is running. Second, on with regard to the global markets, this is something that is of utmost importance. We have 3 key aspects. One is rising legal certainty in international trade. Second is further diversification of trade relations and supply chains. And the third one is fighting protectionism. Let me explain it briefly. Fighting protectionism is of utmost importance. It's so easy to invoke false patriotism in order to protect your own economy. But if all the countries would do the same, we would have a race to the bottom, and at the end of the day, we all would pay a price for not having a free and global trade. I hope really from the bottom of my heart that the new administration in the US will help us to broker a consensus between the United States and the EU on a trade relationship, and that we can abolish many measures with regard to tariffs and trade inspired by protectionism and no longer up to date. The same applies, by the way, for our partners in Asia and also in China. We made clear that we cannot accept dumping practices and that we insist on fair and open markets. Legal certainty, raising legal certainty in international trade is exactly the same. We need a level playing field, especially between EU and Asian countries, like again China. A lot of things have to be done. SMEs cannot defend their own interest alone in relationship to these big countries. Therefore, we are your ally, and we have the possibility to achieve something if and as long as we stay united. And the last point is further diversification of trade relationship and supply chains. Yes, trade relationship, we are negotiating free trade agreements with many countries and regions. This is of utmost importance. And second, we have seen that the dependency of single suppliers somewhere in the world can severely damage our economic activities in Europe, and therefore we want to diversify and we want to help SMEs to have not only one but several options when it comes of international im and export relationship.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I'll put that question to you, Commissioner Breton.
Yes, thank you. Of course, I'm in full agreement with what Peter Altmaier just said, but I would like to comment on the first part. And it is true, yes, that at the beginning of the pandemic, we had some difficulties in the single market, and I had some difficulties. And I should tell you that after the first few days, when everyone, Europe and the world, discovered the impact of the pandemic, I had to call myself many ministers in the EU to say, hey, be careful, don't close your border, because it's true that at the beginning of the pandemic, we unfortunately had to witness that some member states had closed their border. I don't blame anyone, of course. It was really, how could I phrase it, a consideration. But I should also tell you that after a few days, we reopened everything. We put in place green lanes. We organized again the well-functioning of the single market. And we learned two things. The first thing is that more than ever, and I think this is a given of this period that we are all coping with. One of the most important things that we have built together, Europeans, is the single market. It is probably one of our biggest assets. And of course, it is so important for SMEs. And now everybody understands that. So just for you to know, when we unfortunately started to see that we may have a second wave, and I talked immediately with my friend Peter, and we decided together that I will call personally each minister to make sure that this time we don't close borders. And by the way, we didn't. And that, I think, is extremely important. We are again monitoring everything which is happening, and I think that we learn also how to behave, how to organize ourselves, how to make sure that things are functioning well. So, but of course, that's my task, and I'm doing it on a daily basis. The second part of your question, I just would like to remind you that, again, I mentioned it already. We organize in order to monitor, to see what was happening within our own continent. We organize ourselves in 14 industrial ecosystems, and as I said, SMEs are the biggest part of it. So we have, of course, as you know, tourism, mobility, retail, automotive, so of course, space and defense, and so on and so on. And it is extremely important because then we can definitely look at what happened on each ecosystem. We are currently working on a mapping, or let's say a matrix, for each ecosystem. To establish a complete diagnosis of the entire value and supply chain, to identify also the needs and mobilize the tools where they are most needed. And of course, SMEs will be, as you can imagine, a key component of our ecosystems. We are also looking at how we could enhance skills with my colleague Nicolas Schmidt, with a pact of skills that we are deploying, ecosystem per ecosystem, which will benefit, of course, to SMEs. So again, this is, I think, a very concrete and modern tool to make sure that we embark everybody into this transition and that we can accelerate this transition and to rebuild after the crisis a stronger Europe a stronger economy, and a stronger network of SMEs. Thank you.
Well, can I thank you very much, Commissioner Breton, and earlier Minister Altmaier, for your remarks and your time and your insight. Very much appreciated here today. Now, this SME Assembly is really all about how we help SMEs to get through the pandemic. So I'd like to turn now from those in government who are trying their very best to deliver to help that, to those on the receiving end, our magnificent European entrepreneurs. And let's hear from two of those entrepreneurs and find out what they think about the current situation. And I'm welcome now to Mathilde Mee-Lind, entrepreneur and board member of SME United, and Fiona Candon, entrepreneur and deputy president of Chambers Ireland. Very welcome to both of you this morning, and I hope you enjoyed that address by Commissioner Breton and Minister Altmaier. So I'd love to just go through a few issues that both of you would have been experiencing in both of your separate industries. And I might just turn to you, Fiona, first of all. Just tell us about your business and how your industry has fared over the past 9 months of the pandemic.
Thank you, Shona. My company specialises in project management. So we supply 200 plus expert companies and individuals to deliver development solutions, mainly within the tourism industry, actually. So we provide a full project management suite to agencies, authorities and the private sector. And we've been really lucky over the last while since March. Agility, quickness to adapt and respond to client needs has been tough, but our team and the suppliers that we work with have helped us to do that and get through it. No 2 days are ever the same when working in business, but we've just had to get on with it and do our very best.
Now, you're also Deputy President of Chambers Ireland. So what are the measures that Chambers Ireland have sort of made to ensure that, you know, businesses have been helped throughout this period?
Well, businesses, particularly smaller ones, tend to gravitate towards those they know and trust in the times of crisis. And Chambers are closer with their member companies now more than ever. Here in Ireland, Chambers Ireland and my own local chamber, Sligo Chamber, have provided clear, ongoing guidance to all SMEs on the ever-changing supports landscape since last March. And us as SMEs have also supported Chambers Ireland in their hugely effective dialogue at government level to inform and shape policies. I guess in summary, listening, advocating and communicating. In Ireland, a major impact we had at Chambers Ireland level was convincing the Irish government that grant support, not just loans, would have to be provided to the companies most affected. And then across Europe, we have Eurochambre, of course, our European Association of Chambers, and they have really galvanised the network during this crisis. For example, by enabling chambers to work together to tackle issues that go beyond their own national economy, like barriers to cross-border movement and supply chain disruption. And chambers are also working closely with the Commission, of course, and national authorities to ensure that the next generation EU recovery plan mentioned by Minister Altmaier this morning delivers real added value for us. It's really important that chambers are part of these discussions so that the national recovery plans at European level are really there and support us ultimately to survive and to grow.
Thanks, Fiona. And Mathilde, I'm sure what you just heard there from Fiona resonates with you, but tell us again about your business and again how your industry has fared over the past 9 months.
Okay, I can tell you a little bit, but I am a founder of several hairdressing salons, and I also am a board member of Swedish SME organizations, Företagarna. So I work with different kinds of businesses, but in the hairdressing industry, it's the impact of the pandemic has been really hard. It's very hard in Sweden because we get double messages that you shouldn't go to the hairdresser, but the hairdresser should stay open. So we have that. We can't work from home. We have to work physically with our customers. So for that reason, it's been really hard, and the mental pressure has been really high also in our industry, both to customers and also the employees, and of course for the business owners that really have to try to adjust their businesses, but we still have to meet the customers physically. So it's been a hard time now for the industry and also for other small businesses, of course.
Yeah, I think everyone can sympathise with what you mentioned there around confusing messages. But you mentioned there you're also a board member of SME United. So what measures has SME United done to help you and businesses?
Yeah, we have, member organizations have provided continuously advice to entrepreneurs on which sanitary measures who should be applicable for which activities, designing support measures tailored to needs of the entrepreneurs, for example, rent compensations and so on. Exchange of information amongst member organization on issues for SMEs to encountering due to lockdowns, disruption or in supply chains, prohibition to cross borders, etc. So there's been a lot of things, and also exchange of best practices measures to SMEs and propose solutions like short-time work streams, fast track past the borders of trucks, and so on. And then also develop a proposal for EU level actions like liquidity support, green lanes, and so forth.
Fiona, cash is obviously always critical for businesses, but obviously, particularly, it's at this time it is. So, really, what are the best ways of helping SMEs to manage the debt burden that's been brought on and exacerbated by the pandemic?
Well, I suppose at EU level and at national level in many countries, measures have been taken on board since March to help businesses cover their fixed costs and avoid redundancies. And these have been hugely welcomed by us all in business. We recognise and we know that they can't go on forever, but at the same time, we must be very conscious that much of Europe is back to where we were last spring. So it's important that we don't roll back on that just yet. Also important at European level that public bodies also play their part by paying their debts and rapidly increasing the velocity of money in the economy. So all of those things are very, very important for us.
One thing we've also heard is criticism of the banks, really, that there's a uncoordinated approach to lending policies, and perhaps that some banks aren't taking into account that this is really, a different time. So, what's been your experience in relation to banks in particular?
I suppose with banks, of course, it's a two-way partnership. There's the business and the bank. And it's very important, I suppose, that businesses are able to articulate their ask and to clearly define that for a bank. And on the other side, it's important for the bank to recognise that for businesses to forecast and do their projections right now, it's really, really difficult. So it's about building a relationship around that. Also helping businesses through training and supports to be able to put that ask down on paper, not just for banks, but for any lending institution type supports or funds. The crisis is also a great opportunity for the EU and capital markets to explore non-bank sources of funding as well, particularly equity structures as a priority. It's not all about banks.
Matilda, I suppose, everyone now really has to turn digital. Every business, if they really want to survive, they've had to do it very fast. But not every market is digital. So how can the EU, the institutions, governments help those businesses become digital?
Well, for entrepreneurs to be able to be fully digital, right infrastructure is required. Many countries, especially in rural areas, still lack basic infrastructure, such as broadband. So entrepreneur cannot engage in, for instance, e-commerce or provide remote working where not stable connection is available, and that's really important. So moreover, SMEs should get equal access to data. When coaching entrepreneurs, I noticed that many cannot develop a new innovative products or services because they do not have the access to the necessary data. And there is also an important economic part in this. It's expensive for SMEs to get access to information and education within the digitalization. For instance, hotels that provide rooms through our platforms do not get information from the customers to provide tailor-made services for those who come to stay. So EU should ensure a level playing field and guarantee SMEs to get equal access and education in data.
Yeah, I mean, we heard there from Commissioner Breton and Minister Altmaier that really moving to digital is really the way forward in terms of driving the recovery. But you mentioned their skills. I mean, do entrepreneurs have the right skills for this?
I think many need a lot more, especially the small ones. So during the lockdown in spring, many entrepreneurs made giant leaps in digitalizing their businesses. But for many, it remains a challenging topic to get to know it, to have the possibility. So we had to move, everybody has to move very quickly now. So the next phase will be also have to tackle things like cybersecurity. That's something that often is unknown for the small ones. And there are many do not have the necessary info yet. Further developing digital skills of entrepreneur remains really important. Digital Innovation Hub should be cooperate closely with SMEs organization to reach as many entrepreneurs as possible and to get the knowledge out as soon as possible, because it's about time, actually.
Yeah, Matilda, just one of the things that Commissioner Breton had said as well was that the crisis is leading to examples, high levels of examples of bad payment behaviour. And I'm sure most people listening can understand or have an experience of it or know an experience with that. But he actually said that it may mean that some SMEs will have to close down. You know, what's your assessment of that? Is that as widespread as he's making out? And what's your own experience?
Well, I think that the European Payment Report from Intrum shows that a business information company shows that that 1 in 2 companies state that late payment threatens their survival during the pandemic. So this is kind of crucial. 78% of companies across all sectors accepted longer payment terms that they are comfortable with, mainly because they didn't want to damage their relationships with the clients. I was really happy to hear that Commissioner Breton was taking action with this point, asking all companies and authorities to pay their invoice in time. The observatory can be a good initiative if it takes action. For instance, intervene with authorities or big companies impose long payment terms on their SME suppliers. Additionally, we asked the Commission to open infringement procedures against member states who do not comply with the directive and impose longer payment terms to SMEs in public procurement. Finally, we are convinced that to really tackle the issue of late payments, a revision of the directive is necessary and putting in place a standard of 30 days payment term.
Thank you, Matilda. I think there's one other question I want to ask you both about, which is around health, in particular mental health. And everybody suffering from this pandemic is also going to suffer somewhat with their mental health, but also in particular SMEs who are really holding the fort and, as we mentioned earlier, face an uncertain future. Fiona, I'll just go to you. Do you think there's a case for specialist support for managers and entrepreneurs during this time?
Yes, absolutely. I think that both commercial and emotional resilience are required by managers and owners right now. Supporting the owners and the managers themselves first and creative ways of how to help them to be emotionally resilient and to recover, but also ways to support staff. So there's 2 cases. So staff, some staff have become extremely busy. They've been maybe working from home under different circumstances, and life has become more stressful in the work environment. So there's a certain support required for them also. And then, of course, staff who have been laid off for a period of time and are returning to work, again, supports for them about their return to work and their emotional resilience within the workplace will be important.
And same question to you, Matilda. I mean, we talk a lot about mental health, but specifically in the SME sector, where there's so much uncertainty alongside, physical health as well. What's your experience? And do you also think that there's really a case to be made for specialist support for entrepreneurs during this time?
Yeah, I think so. They should be available. And then, of course, they should have the opportunity to choose by themselves. But actually, the pressure right now is coming from so many directions. It's from the customers. It's from the employees that are really, a lot of employees are really tired now. And now when the second wave has arrived, it's kind of you almost felt like you were going to make it, and now it's hard again. And their anxiety goes towards to the business owner, so they have to bear that too, and also their own fright and fear for losing their businesses. Many of them has put their house in loans to get the business working, and so when they have so many things that they risk right now. So I think to get their own support and also to get knowledge how to handle other people's worries actually right now, which should be really good. So I hope that this will end soon, actually, so they can kind of recover a bit.
Absolutely. Do you think, is that help on its way, Fiona? I mean, because everybody is sort of fighting fire, and we're in the second wave now. But is that sort of mental health support on its way, or is there prospect of it?
Within my own industry, I know that within the tourism industry in particular, that the agencies and authorities would be asking that we are putting supports and projects in place around the area of emotional resilience. Most definitely, I can see that happening. Yeah.
And Matilda, have you seen evidence of that? Because obviously, I'm sure people will need it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I can see that organizations that has different kinds of businesses in it, they are doing things right now, actually. And it's been a big talk of the town, you can say, in Sweden, that to also put in this in all actually talked about putting it in legislation, that you have to take care of also the mental health.
So another issue, of course, and you mentioned it earlier, Fiona, was that certain people are returning to work in different industries because other industries have shut down. So diversification is obviously key and really one of the only ways to survive. So what level of training is available for people who want to adapt and go into industries that are actually very busy at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's there probably isn't, the training isn't there right now, but it's on the way. And as SMEs, we're asking for, I suppose, large strategic programs for the owner. I think they are going to have to lead out on the economy, and our national governments and national authorities are going to have to think about how we're going to make those brave leaders much more resilient to come out of this recovery. So that's the starting point. But matched to that, then, I really think there's going to need to be operational training for staff within businesses around emotional resilience, but also around diversification, because some people will be returning to work to do a very different job than when they left. So both at the level of the leader and both at the level of the staff, both will need to come together next year, very early in the first 6 months of next year. Yeah.
Yeah, Matilda, how do you see that happening now? People diversifying, but moving into an area that they had never even considered in the past, and now they have to do it post haste almost in order to survive.
Yeah, well, I think if we should look at it, it's kind of necessary to do hasty things right now, but it also starts. Things and businesses starts to grow now in different directions. So I think one thing that we really need to make sure that those, like you said, Fiona, the brave ones that really have the guts to go out there and try something new, they should also get some kind of support, because they are going to lift other people up. And I think that it's, in one way, they're starting to show examples of those that have made it, not only those who don't make it. So I think it's kind of, I hope, really hope that in the beginning of next year, it feels like New Year's Eve is something really special this year. And from them, we're going to look forward. I really hope so. And it feels like there are new, exciting businesses starting up also.
Yeah, that's a quite an optimistic tone, I think, Matilda. Fiona, would you share that optimism? I mean, obviously nobody can predict the future, but do you feel that maybe the Commission, the Member States, industries are starting to get a hold on what the future may look like during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly led to a huge amount of innovative thinking, hasn't it, right across the board? It's interesting to see not just at business level, but, authorities have had to think differently. Everybody has had to think differently right across Europe. So, I suppose, to end on a positive note is that hopefully we're going to come out of this well, and we're going to come out of this even better because we've been forced to think differently and forced to diversify. So, yes, I'm hopeful, very hopeful.
Okay, well, listen, thank you both to our amazing entrepreneurs on those two optimistic tones. I think it's a good place to leave it. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.